Special Director, SCCU, to Advocate W. Miller, Acting Regional Head, SCCU Durban, and CC is Advocate Mhlochwa, Acting Director of Public Prosecutions, KwaZulu-Natal. It is dated on the front page as 9 January 2012, and the subject title is referenced as Colonel Naveen Madhu, with particularity to additional details. Notwithstanding the date on this particular page, if I can ask you to just turn to page 94. Of that same bundle. There is in fact a date mentioned there though, the 4th of December 2011, and it's signed off by Advocate Alice Mkhwebi, or rather not signed off by Advocate Alice Mkhwebi. Is this the particular document that you were referring to?
That is the document, but I have it as Advocate Lawrence Mkhwebi. That's how he's known.
Thank you. Is it correct that this particular document concerned representations that were made to his office, as you've previously indicated?
That is my interpretation of the document, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, one can say that in the first paragraph in that letter, that document, it's a letter from Advocate L.S. Mkhwebi, dated 9 January 2012, addressed to Advocate W. Muller, Acting Regional Head, SCCU Durban, and a copy sent to Advocate Mhlochwa, Acting Director of Public Prosecution, KwaZulu-Natal. And in the first paragraph, he says that his office, that is Advocate Mkhwebi, received on 6 December, says 201, it must have been 2011, must have intended 2011. His office received representations from the lawyer representing Colonel Madhu in the above-mentioned matters. It then says a copy of the said representations is attached here for your information. So it would appear that arising from some representations made by the lawyer for Colonel Madhu, he then decided to make certain inquiries. Okay, thank you.
Chair. Can you just very simply explain what exactly does representations mean?
Chair, my understanding of representations are that if you as an accused feel that that there is no evidence against you, or that there might be a prosecution for ulterior purposes, that one could then bring that to the attention of the NDPP, or in this particular instance, I would have thought it should have been sent to the DPP, and if they had not had any closure, that it would then be advanced to the NDPP.
Excuse me.
In that regard, can I then ask you whether or not Advocate Lawrence Mkhwebi ought to have received these representations directly from the attorneys of Colonel Madhu?
Well, I'm not sure why you think he should deal with that. A lawyer is instructed by an accused person, and the lawyer decides to make representations. It's the lawyer who decides where he will or she will send those representations. Even Advocate Mkhwebi, does he have a choice of whether he receives them or not? If they are sent to him, they land on his desk, As
it pleases, Chair, I'd like the witness, though, to to clarify to us whether or not it was in fact well within the right of Advocate Mrwebi to consider the representations as he did.
Well, I'm not sure. You might know something that I don't know yet, but an accused lawyer decides that on behalf of his client or her client, he or she wants to make representations to the NPA. He or she decides to make representation to the prosecutor, or he or she decides to make representations to somebody much higher up. I'm not sure that is something that we really want to spend time on at this stage.
Yeah. Chair, this particular witness will be talking to the proper channels that ought to have been followed in this particular process.
By whom? Followed by whom?
By an accused person, and in this particular instance.
Yes, but if the accused person decides not to follow or doesn't know, how does that assist us? Or doesn't know what the correct procedure is? It's different if the point being made is something about Mr. Mrwebi. Is there a point that is sought to be made about Mr. Mrwebi?
That is in fact the point, Chair.
And what's the point?
The point is that through the evidence of General Booysen, the representations ought not to have been considered.
Ought not to have been?
Ought not to have been considered.
Well, are we at the stage where they are being considered? All I know is there's been, Mrwebi has received some representations and he's asking for comment from the prosecutor.
As it pleases, Chair, can I maybe just rephrase my question to the General instead?
Yeah, maybe. Otherwise, maybe at some stage later, maybe there might be a proper foundation for what you or Major General Booysen might have in mind. But as things stand, it doesn't appear to me that it's really something that one can make much point about representations being sent to a wrong person by an accused lawyer.
As it pleases.
That's assuming it's a wrong place to send them.
As it pleases, Chair. General Booysen, in your experience, what was the proper channels to process the representation?
Chair, I specifically mentioned this in my statement because Advocate Mrwebi, his name will crop up on a few other occasions later in my statement. In my experience and over a number of years, and I've canvassed this with a number of prosecutors, normally if you want to make representations, in this particular instance, it should have gone to the DPP or to Advocate Miller, who was the head of the office in Durban. And I understand the Chair's concern about the attorney writing directly to the NDPP office. They could have been unaware of the procedure. But my problem is that I feel that Advocate Mrwebi should not have entertained the representation. He should have referred it in its entirety back to the DPP's office to deal with it. If the accused was still not satisfied, he could then escalate it to the NDPP's office. That's how I've experienced it over the years. So I just find it a bit odd that Advocate Mrwebi would entertain this. Looks more rather a complaint than a representation of the attorney of Mr. Madu.
No, it may well be, I don't know, it may well be that it was a wrong procedure. It may well be that it was a wrong place to send them to on the part of the accused lawyer. I'm just saying at this stage, it doesn't appear to me that there is a proper foundation for anything for us to canvass more. Maybe when other aspects of Major General Booysen's evidence have been dealt with, we might come back to it if there seems to be something. One, I don't know what the procedure is. Do we know? Do you know, Major General, whether there is a procedure set down in policies or regulations or the statute, the relevant...
Chair, not in terms of statutes, not in the National Prosecuting Authority Act, neither in the Constitution, but the protocol that we've been following over the years, and I've extensively canvassed this with a number of prosecutors. The protocol is go to the DPP. In this instance, you should have gone to the head of the office, Advocate Miller. Then the DPP. If they were still not satisfied, then go to the NDPP. And I don't have a problem with the fact that they send it directly to the NDPP's office, to Advocate Mgwebe. My concern is, why did Advocate Mgwebe deal with the matter instead of referring it back to the DPP's office?
Okay, well, what we'll do, I think, canvass other matters. Later on, see whether there is a proper basis to come back to the question. Okay? Let's see whether the other evidence will provide anything. One has got to bear in mind, if there are no rules or statutory provisions or policies that specify where representations should be directed, and maybe there's just a practice, one must also check whether there's a discretion to refer or not to refer, or what, and what we want to make of it, what is sought to be made of it.
As it pleases, Chair, I've just got two quick questions in relation to this then. If I can ask you to turn to page 92. Can you read paragraph 2 into the record, please?
The complete paragraph.
Just, not the sub-paragraphs, just the top paragraph, first headliner.
Okay. In order for this office to meaningfully respond to the said representations, the prosecutor dealing with the matter must please ensure that the following is submitted to this office.
I'm sorry, where is that?
On page 92.
92. Yes, thank you.
Is it correct then that following on from the paragraph 2, there is a list of various points for analysis by the prosecutor?
That's indeed so, Chair.
I think going back to what we were talking about, and this is for later on if we look at the issue, it may be that, Major General, you want to say nothing more than simply this, that it was strange that this is how these representations were dealt with, or that this is the person who dealt with them, because the practice is the following, and maybe you say no more than that. But you will decide if you want to say no more than that, whether you want to infer something more. So you can just, it depends what you have in mind. So if you want to say something more than that it looks strange or something like that, then you will say so, and then we can look at that. And then.
Chair, I'm happy to proceed.
To put it that, yes.
The reason, and as the Chair will see later on, there's a whole chapter that deals with certain prosecutors at the National Prosecuting Authority that were always invariably involved in these, in certain investigations. And Advocate Mgwebe was one of them. So this was merely to set the tone where I started to experience for the very first time some sort of, I don't want to call it interference in this instance, but later on, it's clear to me that there was definitely interference. So this is merely setting the tone for what's going to happen later on when I discuss the prosecutors.
Yes, okay. No, that's fine. Thank you.
In that regard, could I then also just highlight that paragraph 3 on page 92 asks very particular factual detail questions, which runs for at least 1.5 pages. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Then can I ask you to turn to page 96 of the same bundle? It appears to be a document which is marked memorandum.
That's correct, Chair.
Can you please and it's dated, 22 January 12, presumably 2012. It's an 8-page document. Can you please identify what this document is?
Chair, this is the response that I referred to earlier on that was penned by Advocate Becky Mnyati, the prosecutor in the matter.
Yes.
And is it your understanding that this was in fact the memorandum of response to the letter from Advocate Lawrence Mkhwebi?
That's my understanding, Chair.
If I can then ask you to quickly turn to page 103 and read the conclusion into the record.
Chair, the conclusion in paragraph 26. In my view, the case against Madhu is overwhelming, and I recommend that he must be indicted in the High Court.
Thank you. Do you know what is the current employment status of Advocate Mnyati?
Chair, what I can say is I bumped into Advocate Mnyati at the High Court in Durban during one of our appearances, and he actually called me aside. He sent someone to fetch me, and we went around the corner, and he said to me, General, I'm not happy with what's happening here. He said to me, because at that time we were being prosecuted, and he indicated to me that his stance in this matter had caused him to be overlooked for promotion, and that he intended resigning from the NPA, which, and I saw him a couple of months later on the beachfront, and he stopped by and showed me his new car that he had bought, and he's told me that he had actually gone into private practice.
Yes.
So as far as I know, he's currently in private practice.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know whether or not, whilst Advocate Mnyati was still part of the prosecutorial service, whether or not he was promoted in any way?
Chair, and I'm testifying now what I've been told by Advocate Mnyati. He was shortlisted for a promotional post, but after he had penned this legal opinion, he was overlooked for promotion, and either removed from the post or overlooked for promotion. The indications were that he was going to be promoted. And what I understood from him is that because of his stance in this matter, he did not get promoted.
Yeah. There's a limit to how far one can go with matters which are based on what someone else has said, and we just need to tread with care.
As it pleases, Chair. During June 2012, there was a change to the incumbents, to the acting DPP position.
Well,
They are now on
I'm
page.
sorry, before we go there, Advocate Mkhwebi requested information from the prosecutor in the Madhu matter, and the prosecutor furnished a comprehensive response, at the end of which he said there was an overwhelming case against Madhu, Colonel Madhu. I want to know what happened, what decision, if any, was taken after that, as far as you know, and what happened out of those representations and so on. Do you know?
I do, Chair.
Yes. Tell me.
Chair, soon after this event, a new acting DPP was appointed in KZN, Advocate Moipone Noko. And a month or two, I cannot recall exactly how long after her appointment, she withdrew the charges against Pandey and Madhu.
But you don't know the circumstances. You just know that the charges. There was a new provincial director of probable prosecutions, and soon after that appointment, the charges were withdrawn. That's what you know.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Following the withdrawal of the charges, can I ask you to turn to page 105, please?
Did you ever inquire in one way or another from the NPA what the basis was for the withdrawal of the charges?
Chair, two significant things occurred at the time. The investigating officer inquired from her as to why the charges were withdrawn, and she would not respond to the investigating officer. She did not give reasons at that time. The second thing is the investigating officer reported to me that Advocate Norco did not want to return the docket. So she kept the docket with her for quite a period of time. Much later, she issued a media statement, and I do quote that in my affidavit, Chair.
Yes.
That she had withdrawn the charges in the interest of justice, or words to that effect, but that I do have the exact words.
Okay, Mr. Temba will direct you to that part of your statement if when she wants to do that, because it would be good to know. And did they stay withdrawn? They've never been reinstated, those charges?
Chair, I do speak to that a bit later on in my statement. What happened is, about 2 years ago, I'd, in conjunction with a journalist, had written a book about what had happened to me, and the book had appeared online on I think the Monday, and I think that was the Thursday.
Yes.
We were on our way to Cape Town to attend the launch of the book. And then she told me, that was not Jessica Pitchford, we were both going to Cape Town for the release of the book. And she had just watched on a cell phone the news. It was then announced by Advocate Sean Abrams that Pandey and Madhu would be prosecuted. I hadn't heard anything about it again until much later, when I bumped into another journalist in Durban, Tanya Broughton, and she said to me she had seen the lawyer of Pandey and Madhu at the High Court and inquired from them what they were doing there. And he then told her that they'd filed a review application for the decision to prosecute them. And that case referred specifically to the attempt to bribe me. Chair, I do deal with that extensively later on.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
If I can then, by the direction of the Chair, take you to page 105. Is that the media statement that you referred to?
That's
earlier?
the medium. That's right, Chair.
This media statement is dated 3 April 2013, and it's titled Graft Charges Against Pandey Withdrawn. It appears to have been published on the IOL.co.za website. Can I ask you to read the last two paragraphs into the record, please?
Earlier this year, the provincial prosecution boss, Advocate Moipone Noko, instructed that the charges against him and supply chain unit police Naveen Madhu, involving an alleged attempt to bribe KZN Hawks head Johan Booysen with 2 million rand, be provisionally withdrawn. She said that while there was a prosecutable case, She had concerns regarding justice, in inverted commas, based on the representations which Pandey had made and which needed further investigation.
If I could then ask you to turn the page and read the third short sentence into the record.
But State Advocate Dorian Pavers said the state could not proceed, and then in inverted commas, because of problems regarding the preparation of evidence.
So is it to be understood that despite all of the evidence that had been investigated and collated, Advocate Norku, shortly after her appointment as the acting DPP, withdrew the charges against Colonel Madhu and Mr. Toshon Pandey?
Chair, I'm not a prosecutor, and I don't want to pretend that I'm a prosecutor. But I have worked with prosecutors for more than 30 years, after I joined the detectives more than 30 years ago. I think I'm in a position to more or less say when there's at least a prima facie case and a prosecutable case. In this particular instance, Chair, every conceivable type of evidence is in that docket. Physical evidence, i.e. fingerprints, Act 70 interceptions, a 252A authorization by the DPP, eyewitness statements how the money was put in the boot of my car. There was even a bank note in the notes that linked with an account of Toshon Pandey. The evidence was overwhelming, but in spite of the overwhelming evidence, the charges were withdrawn.
And the police officers who were involved in arresting Colonel Madhu, who observed what happened at the basement on the day in question, have at all material times been available to give evidence, I would imagine.
Chair, every single witness from the...
Obviously, you have been available.
Yes, every single witness had been available all along.
Yes.
One witness unfortunately passed away, I think now in December, Colonel Lane Sheriff. But over and above that, all the witnesses, every single one of them are available to testify.
Yes. Just, you mentioned earlier on, and maybe Ms. September was still going to deal with that, but I just want to know now. You mentioned that you learned at some stage that apparently Mr. Pandey was bringing a review application in relation to the decision to reinstate charges. Did you ever receive any court application papers as an interested party to see that indeed there was a review application and you had to deal with it?
Chair, I'll also deal with that a bit later on, but I can answer you now.
Please do.
What happened is, I found it strange at the time that there's a review application and I'm not even aware of it. I would have at least expected myself to have been a co-respondent. Subsequent to that, I received a phone call from Advocate Kolisi Mkasana, who had informed me that he had seen the founding affidavit opposed to by Colonel Lavin Madhu in the review application. And I cannot remember who favored me with a copy. I might have gotten it through a journalist. And I read the founding affidavit. And the founding affidavit, number one, Madhu lies under oath there because he says that he's a witness in the Cato Manor case, which he's not. He's never been on the witness list. He's never been a witness. But that's not the real problem. The real problem with the founding affidavit is that it's an attack on Advocate Nkasana, an attack on myself, an attack on Mr. McBride from IPIT. According to the founding affidavit, it was a conspiracy between myself and Advocate Nkasana to have them re-prosecuted. And they also made certain allegations against Mr. McBride. Now, the fact that we were not co-respondents I was expecting Advocate Abrams to at least deny the allegations and ask us for confirmatory affidavits, or at least inform us to make affidavits to support him in opposing the review application. The review application was opposed, but the fact that we were kept out of the loop tells me that I suspect it was a paper exercise, that they never intended prosecuting them. But what had happened, Chair, I established probably about 2 months or 3 months ago, that the matter had been struck off the roll.
So that matter has been, that review application has been pending, as far as you know, for how many years now, or from when?
No, Chair, it was struck off the roll now.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, you mean the criminal matter or the review application?
No, so they took the decision to prosecute by Abrams on review. That was, so they must have been informed 2 years ago when they decided to prosecute him, they were going to take the matter on review. Mm-hmm. So it had been in and out of court for a while, and about 2-3 months ago.
Or the criminal matter?
No, the review matter, Chair.
The review matter?
The review...
The review matter has been in court a few times, is that what you are saying?
That's right, Chair.
But you say it has been struck off the roll?
It was struck off the roll. In my understanding is that Advocate Wendy O'Brien from the Commercial Crime Court in Durban, they are preparing to now re-prosecute Madhu and Pandey for the attempt to bribe me.
Yes.
But Chair, at this juncture, maybe I must just also make it easier to understand.
Yes.
There are different cases that that I mentioned in my statement.
Yes.
The main corruption charge of 60 million rand. That case was declined to prosecute a good couple of years ago. And when I eventually went back to work after my suspension was lifted, I wrote to the then new NDPP Advocate Nkasana, giving him my views on those charges. And he had appointed Advocate Harry Nell at the NPA office to review all those cases. My understanding is, and once again, I'm not officially been informed of this.
Yes.
My understanding is that, and this I also learned through the media, when it was reported that the review matter for the criminal case of attempted bribery had been struck off the roll, the journalist then approached the National Prosecuting Authority to ask him why aren't they now proceeding with that matter. And the answer they got was, well, they're waiting for the other matter as well. That's a 60 million one. So that matter had also been taken on review. So in my view, the attempt to bribe me can proceed without the other matter that's still under review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That then leaves us with the last block on the timeline, sorry. If I could ask you to just turn quickly to Exhibit ZC. And in particular, page 2. At paragraph 6, you document additional evidence relating to the Toshon Pandey corruption investigation, and in particular regarding the release of the 15 million rand. Can you please inform the Chair about such evidence?
Chair, what had happened is, on and off there were attempts to have the 15 million released. Fortunately for myself and unfortunately for Mr. Pandey, I had someone from our financial department who would tell me there are moves afoot to have the money released. They devised a number of strategies. For instance, they tried to have the money paid out at national office. They were communicating directly to national head office. I do not know whom at national head office. And at one stage, I had asked this person, and I don't even want to disclose the gender of this person, because that person would be ostracized.
Yeah.
At one stage, I'd been informed, well, I'd asked this person, is it possible to have money paid out at national head office if it's a provincial matter? And I was informed it was indeed the case. So between myself and the head of finances at the time, Brigadier Kemp, we agreed that that person would go in at night and check on the system because it would be logged at night and then we would be paid out the following day. So for a protected period of time, I had this person going at night to see if it was loaded on the system, and if it had been, I would be contacted so that I could prevent the money to be paid out. I also approached General Ntanjana at the time, the one that passed away, and I told him, because I know that and I managed to get all of the communication between his office and our legal department. And it was clear from that they were contemplating paying out the money. And I told him, I said to him, if you guys are going to pay out this money while it's a subject of a corruption investigation, you're going to make yourselves guilty of corruption as well. But Chair, that,
Yes.
what then happened is I get a frantic call from a person. Well, in our engagements with Mr. Pandey's lawyers, they threatened me with all types of things, and I told them, well, let's go to court then. If you can prove that the state owe you the money, I'll be happy to release the money. And then, it was on the 1st of January, I cannot recall the year, I got a frantic call from a person by the name of Captain Stevens.
Can I just interject and ask you, did you receive this call before or after Toshan Pandey and Colonel Madhu were arrested?
Yes.
Oh, no, sorry,
Yes, Chair.
apologies, not arrested. Before or after the charges were in fact withdrawn? Can you recall?
Chair, I suspect it was after. I'll just have to check the timeline. There were so many
Yes.
events happening at the same time, and some of them I only learned about afterwards.
Yes. So, but you think it was after?
I think it was after, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
After they were arrested or after the charges?
After the
were
withdrawal
withdrawn?
of the charges.
I think after they were withdrawn.
Please proceed.
Chair, so I got this frantic call, and I recall vividly I was at the dam on the day, it was the 1st of January, with my family, and when I left the dam, when I had reception on my phone again, I saw a number of missed calls. So I phoned the person back, and it was a Captain Stevens, and he told me that he had been approached by Mr. Toshan Pandey, and Toshan Pandey wanted him to assist him to have the money released, the 15 million rand. So Toshan Pandey had devised a strategy or a plan to have the money released. So he said to Captain Stevens, you from police side, you must create documents, and I will create invoices. So he was going to create invoices for 15 million rand, but you cannot just send invoices if there was not a service required from the police. So he said to Stevens, you must fabricate call-up instructions for policemen during the World Cup soccer period. And then I'll do invoices to match those figures. Then we can present it, and then the idea was then that Booysen would be happy to release the money. I immediately, on the 1st of January, phoned Captain Pelser once again, said to him, get us 252A authority, which he did. And
Can I just interrupt you again? Just clarify again what Section 252A authority is.
Chair, my understanding of 252A authority, it's a Criminal Procedure Act. It authorizes an ostensible illegal act, and we normally use those in sting operations.
Thank you very much.
So, Chair, we had this 252 authority, and having had experience of how they operated, I called in the investigators and I said to them, you need to do, not that they had not done it previously, but I wanted to ensure that everything was done according to the book. I enlisted the assistance of crime intelligence, and there were subsequent meetings between Mr. Toshan Pandey and Captain Stevens. There were probably about 19. Of the 19, about six
Meetings. 19 meetings.
That's correct, Chair.
Between the two.
Between the two.
Okay.
So we had Stevens wired every time he met Pandey with a camera and a recorder. So the recordings were audio and visual. So over these number of meetings, 16 of them were recorded audioly and visually. At one stage, Stevens had a problem switching on the camera, and that particular meeting was not recorded. But every time that they met, he would report that before the time to the investigators. It would be reported to the DPP dealing with the 252A. And during some of these meetings, Pandey was getting anxious because Stevens was working too slow. And Stevens were making excuses by saying, well, there are people that needs to cooperate from supply chain management. So Pandey at one stage gave Stevens 2,000 rand as a bribe to be paid to one of the people at supply chain management. But Stevens came back with the money. We took the money, put it in an exhibit bag, and it was kept as an exhibit. At a subsequent meeting, Pandey once again complained that Stevens was taking too long. So Stevens said to me, well, look, some of these documents have to be signed by a brigadier. Now, the person in charge of deployment at the time was a Brigadier Vernon Hunter. So Madhu says to him, but you have to, well, then you have to forge his signature. Now, Chair, there was a previous matter completely unrelated to this that Pandey had been involved in, but completely unrelated to this. It was a civil matter in which he had put in a false claim. And when we did the Act 70s, we picked up on the Act 70s that a couple of million rand was going to be paid out to him, and that there was a problem with the claim. So we informed the insurers. And in that particular instance, what he had done is he had cut and pasted the signature of a deceased person. So he tells Stevens, when you forge these signatures, don't cut and paste it. You must make different ones so it looks authentic. We then went to as part of the 252A operation, went to Brigadier Vernon Hunter, and we told him, look, this is what's going on. Your signature is going to be forged, which he agreed to. On the particular day that was done, we had the LCRC, that's the local fingerprint office, come to the office, and in their presence, each document that had been created by Stevens was photographed before the signature was placed thereon, and then afterwards. And Hunter was present as well, where his signature was forged as part of the 252A operation. Chair, what also happened is, in this process, Pandey was getting quite frantic because Stevens was taking too long. So Stevens said to him, well, you know, I have to print the stuff. And Pandey then, they were close to Gateway. Then, I can't remember whether they had gone there himself or sent someone to buy a computer and a printer from Dion's. And he gave him the whole bag with the computer and printer and everything, with the receipt still inside there. So Stevens came back and he handed that over to us as well. That was also handed in as exhibits. Chair, this continued for a period of time, and eventually there was enough evidence to arrest Pandey once again. He was arrested eventually. He appeared in court, but unfortunately that case had also been withdrawn.
And do you know who made the decision to withdraw this time?
Chair, this time around, I think there might be, and I don't want to come up for the prosecutor, but
Yes.
I think there might be a little bit of a valid explanation from the prosecutor's side.
Yes.
To give them the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
A number of these recordings had to be transcribed.
Yes.
And I think it was a white person that had done the transcriptions, and if you don't live in Durban and if you don't know the language the Indians talk, you might get it wrong. So because I could see from the transcriptions it was an Afrikaans person who had transcribed it. So the prosecutor was not happy with that. What subsequently happened to that case, it was sent, at a later stage I'll talk about that as well.
If I can just interrupt you and ask you to turn to page 3 and please identify who was the actual, apologies, page 3 of ZC. On the top of page 3, you informed that the charges were provisionally withdrawn. Please identify who the prosecutor was.
They were provisionally withdrawn by Advocate Dorian Paver.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Chair, much later when and I'll speak to this later on, when
Yes.
Mr. McBride started investigating all these issues,
Yes.
I handed the docket over to IPIT.
Yes.
My understanding was that they had, and I speak under correction, that they had them, the recordings transcribed again, once again. But to date, no one has appeared in that
court.
matter.
Okay, thank you.
To your knowledge, has the 15 million rand been paid to Mr. Doshan Pandey?
Chair, before I respond to that, I just want to add, when the invoices that Pandey eventually created, the understanding is that we owed, well, according to him, we owed him 15 million. But if my memory serves me correctly, the invoices that they eventually created amounted to 17 million. And Chair, as far as I'm aware to date, that 15 million rand has not been paid out.
Thank you.
Can I then take you to page 18 of your affidavit? It's at this juncture that you deal with additional investigations that you were involved in, perhaps not in as much detail as the Doshan Pandey investigation. And in that regard, the next investigation that you deal with in your affidavit is one which you've titled the Amigos case. In very simple terms, please explain what this Amigos case concerned.
Chair, what happened is when the Hawks were established, they combined commercial crime, organized crime, and the Scorpions. That was an interim arrangement, and they then formed the Hawks. So I inherited, for lack of a better description, the investigation from the commercial crime section. There was this one investigation that was known as the Amigos case, which related to the fraudulent acquisition of water purification plants for hospitals. I know in KZN and a few other provinces as well. There were a number of accused. One of them, the prominent accused in this matter was a Mr. Gaston Savoy. I think he was a Bulgarian businessman. And he was charged inter alia with two politicians, Mike Mabuyukulu and Peggy Ngoyeni. They were both members of the legislature in KwaZulu-Natal at some time or other.
If I can just interrupt for the record, can you please spell Peggy Ngoyeni and Mike Kulu? Apologies.
So Ngoyeni is Nkoyeni, and Ngoyeni is...
And there will be an N before the Y.
Sorry, Chair?
There is an N for Nelly before Y. I think you omitted the N. Nkoyeni.
Thank you, Chair.
And Mabuya Kulu is Mabuyakhulu.
Thank you,
Because
Chair.
it's here, you can even just give the spelling yourself, Ms. September. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
So, Chair, they were amongst the accused, Mr. Savoy and Mabuyukulu and Ngoyeni. What happens on a monthly basis, I'll call the investigators, and then they have to give feedback, especially on the high-profile cases. And the investigating officer in this particular matter was Lieutenant Colonel Piet de Plooy. So the investigation had already been in an advanced stage when de Plooy came over to me. So I was not privy to the extent of the evidence in the docket. But nevertheless, Chair, the ploy then reported to me that the then acting DPP in KZN advocate Simpiwe Mlotshwa, there was pressure on him to withdraw the charges against Maboyekulu and Koyeni. So I said to him, Pete, what does the evidence look like? And he said to me, no, sir, there's a solid case. I never physically checked the dockets, but he assured me that there was a solid case. And I said to him, what is the position of Mr. Mlotshwa on the matter, Advocate Mlotshwa? And he said, no, Mlotshwa is proceeding with the matter. He's going ahead full steam. So I was happy with that.
Thank you. Are you aware as to whether or not a forensic investigation was conducted in this particular matter?
I am aware, Chair.
Who conducted that forensic investigation?
If my memory serves me correctly, it was also PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Are you aware of any particular events relating to the involvement of PricewaterhouseCoopers and the prosecutors involved in this matter?
Chair, Colonel Deploy had reported to me at some stage that him and one of the forensic auditors had been summoned to Pretoria by advocates Mgwebi and Mozing. And the meeting was about this particular investigation. And I can recall when they'd come back that Deploy was unhappy. I did not go into the detail of what had occurred at the meeting, but they conveyed to me that when they arrived there, that it was clear to them that there was a notion that there's no evidence against Koyeni and Maboyekulu. And I think it was the ploy who still said, well, to either of the two advocates, either Mozing or Mgwebi, it looks like you've made up your mind already to not proceed. And he basically excused himself from the meeting.
So he must have felt quite strongly.
He did, Chair.
Yeah.
The ploy did feel strong about it.
Yes. Okay.
You said that you inherited this matter. In what year did you inherit the matter? If I could take you to paragraph 58.
Yeah, Chair, that was when I became the head of the Hawks in 2010.
Yes.
Okay. And in paragraph 61, which is at page 19 of your affidavit, you document what the current status is, or rather what...
I'm sorry, Ms. September. Let's... the two investigators went to see Advocate Mgwebi.
No, Chair, it was the investigator, Lieutenant Colonel Piet Deploy.
Yes.
And the forensic investigator from the audit company. I cannot recall who that person was.
Yes, okay. The investigator plus the person from the forensic investigation team.
That's correct, Chair.
They went to see Advocate Mgwebi.
And Advocate Mozing.
And Advocate Mozing.
Anthony Mozing.
Yes, and the report you got was that the two advocates were saying that there was no evidence against Mr. Maboyekulu and Ms. Nkonyeni.
It was a verbal report that I received.
Yeah, a verbal report that you got.
And the way I've articulated that in my statement is that they went along with the notion that the evidence was not sufficient to proceed against those two, whereas Deploy felt that there was enough evidence, and that's why he said to the advocates, looks like you've made your mind up already.
Yes. Now what I want to find out is what happened subsequent to that meeting. What happened is there any decision that was taken by Advocate Mgwebi and Advocates Mgwebi and Mozing, or pursuant to those views that they expressed according to what you are told?
Chair, not by the two of them, but there was
a change of leadership.
There was a significant change of leadership in KZN.
In KZN.
When Advocate Simpiwe Malochwa
Yeah,
was unceremonially
yeah.
pushed aside, in my view, and replaced by Advocate Moipone Noko.
And Advocate Mlochwa had been acting provincial Director of Public Prosecutions.
That's correct, Chair. The appointed DPP at the time was the current NDPP Advocate Shamila Batoy,
Yes.
who had then gone to The Hague and to the International Court.
Yes.
And Advocate Simpiwe Malochwa was appointed as the acting.
Yes.
And at this juncture, he was relieved of his duties and replaced by Advocate Moipone Noko.
Yes. And the replacement, was it on an acting basis?
Also on an acting basis, Chair.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You have just mentioned about the change in leadership. I'm not quite certain if you dealt with this part, but what in fact happened shortly after the change in leadership?
Chair, exactly 2 weeks after Advocate Moipone Noko took up her post, she withdrew the charges against only 2 people of a number of accused, Mike Maboikulu and Peggy Nkoyeni. And I still asked, I think it was Mr. P. Deploy, Colonel Deploy, how much evidence is there? And I think someone still made the statement, if she'd really gone through the evidence that there was, it would have been the equivalent of reading a Bible per day for 14 days. So then,
he seems to have shared the view that you mentioned earlier on, that somebody said there was overwhelming evidence, or was that in regard to the other case of Matu? I thought you said somebody, I don't know whether Mlochwa or somebody said there was overwhelming evidence, but I may be confusing
No, Chair,
the Amigo case with the Madu case.
no, in the Madu case, it was my view.
Yes.
In this matter, it was the view of Lieutenant Colonel Deploy, who reported to me.
Yes, okay.
He was confident that they had a strong case.
Yes, okay. And from what he told you, Advocate Mlochwa was confident as well.
Absolutely, Chair.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Is Advocate Noko, who withdrew the charges against those 2 particular individuals in this case, the same Advocate Noko who withdrew the charges against Colonel Madu and Mr. Tashon Pandey?
That is so, Chair.
The withdrawal of the charges against Mr. Pandey and Colonel Madu, did also happen after Advocate Noko had replaced Advocate Mlochwa?
Yes, Chair. Within 2 weeks after Advocate Noko taking up a post as
Yes.
acting DPP,
Yes.
she withdrew the charges against Maboikulu and
Yes.
Nkoyeni.
Yes.
And then I think about 2 or 3 months later, she withdrew the charges against Pandey and Madu.
Okay, thank you.
Are you aware, General Booysen, whether or not there was a change to the prosecutor who was assigned to this particular case?
Chair, obviously, with the investigators giving me feedback, I knew who the advocates were that were dealing with the matter. So the advocate that dealt with the matter at that stage was Advocate Ndunywa.
Yes.
He was the prosecutor. This investigation had a number of legs. There was one in the Eastern Cape,
Yes.
that I recall, and we had the KZN leg.
Yes.
And Advocate Ndunywa from the DPP's office in KZN, he was dealing with the matter. And I know for a fact that Advocate Ndunywa also felt strongly about the case. And after the charges were withdrawn, the docket was taken away from him and handed over to Advocate Vimbani from the Commercial Crimes Court in Durban.
Okay.
What is the current status of the criminal matter against the 2 individuals whom you've mentioned, such being Peggy Nkonyeni and Mike Mabuyakulu?
Chair, as far as I know, that there was at one stage a review application in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg, and I cannot recall who brought it. It could have been the DA. I don't know what that was about. And I'm also been informed by the investigating officer that Mr. Gaston Savoy, I suspect that he wants to bring in an application for a permanent stay of prosecution. And I don't want to speculate, or I'm merely talking from what I've heard from the investigators, because his argument is, why are they withdrawing charges against those two and not against the rest of the accused? But I do not know the detail of that matter. But as it stands,
the prosecution has never been pursued even against those other accused against whom no withdrawal happened.
No, I think it's proceeding, Chair, against those.
Oh, it's proceeding against those.
As far as I'm aware, it's still on the roll.
Okay.
So just to make sure I too understand, it's proceeding against all other accused other than Peggy Nkonyeni and Mike Mabuyakula, against whom the charges were withdrawn.
That's so, Chair.
Thank you. That then takes us to the next investigation that you deal with in your affidavit from page 19, paragraph 62 to 74. This particular investigation you have marked as looting of the Secret Services account. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Before you start with that one, just to go back on the Amigos case, that's been pending for a long time. Did you say it was around about 2010 or thereabout when it started, as far as you know?
Chair, I was appointed as the head of the Hawks in KZN in 2010.
Yes.
And I think that case, when I inherited it with Deploy being the investigating officer, it could have been a year prior to that, or even more, but I cannot recall.
So certainly when you were appointed in 2010, it was already pending.
That's right, Chair.
In the sense of it being under investigation with no appearance in court, or already you think that there had been appearance in court already by the time you were appointed?
No, Chair, when I was appointed by then, I can recall they had all the accused sitting there in the box.
Yes.
There's a newspaper photograph, and that's where the name Amigos came from.
Yeah.
So when I inherited Deploy with this investigation, they'd already appeared a number of times.
So to say the least, it's been going on, you would say, no less than 9 years.
I would even say 10 years, Chair.
Or even 10 years. And as far as you know, are you able to say, or maybe you are not able because you might not have looked at the evidence, are you able to say around about when, as far as you know, there was enough evidence for the trial to proceed?
Chair, when Deploy came over to me from commercial crime, what I did not mention is, prior to them coming over to me, I was a brigadier in charge of organized crime, and my counterpart for commercial crime was Brigadier Latergan. Now, once every quarter or every now and then, the two of us had to go and give feedback pertaining to our investigations to the person who was then my immediate supervisor, Commissioner Pat Brown, General Pat Brown. And I could recall, although I did not take much notice of Latergan's feedback, but I could recall that there was discussions between him and Brown that they were getting questions from I think it was the portfolio committee, I'm not too sure, because I did not really pay attention to his cases because it didn't concern me at that time, where questions were asked about the detail of the investigation. And I recall that Brown always used to say to Latergan, just give them the necessary, the case has been remanded or it's still under investigation. But when the ploy came over to me, by then the investigation was complete. And I say this, Chair, for the following reason. They were charged for racketeering. Now, in terms of the Prevention of Organised Crime Act, I think it's Section 2(1), you can only prosecute a person for racketeering if there's an authorization by the NDPP. So the NDPP would not have authorized that investigation if it had not been completed. So in my view, when the ploy came over to me with his investigation and them already having appeared in court, as far as I'm concerned, the investigation was complete.
Okay, no, that's fine. I do seem to remember that there may have been a case involving Mr. Savoy, which went up to the Constitutional Court. It may have had something to do
Chair,
with it.
I know about that. Mr. Savoy, they applied to the Constitutional Court to say that certain aspects of the Prevention of Organised Crime Act were unconstitutional.
Yes.
I actually attended that particular case at the Constitutional Court.
Yes.
But I cannot remember the phrase, but they said that it was an academic argument that they should wait for such a case to come up and then argue it.
Yeah, no, I think I remember that case because I would have sat in the matter. But that might be part of the reason for the delay in the finalization of the matter. If there was a challenge to the statute, that might be part of the reason for the delay.
That could be a Chair, but I think that matter had been disposed of
A long time
probably
ago.
about 7 years ago.
Yes, okay, thank you. I think let's take this short adjournment and we'll resume at 11:30.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn.
All rise.
Booysen. Yesterday, I intimated that we might use 2 hours today to hear your further evidence. 2 hours would take us to 12 o'clock. Is it fine with you if we go up to 12:30?
Chair, I'm in your hands.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just before the adjournment, we were about to start on the next investigation that you were involved in. And that takes us to page 19 of your affidavit, which is in bundle ZA, and in particular, paragraph 62. You have titled, or rather named the investigation, Looting of the Secret Services Account. In very simple terms, can you please explain what this investigation concerned?
Chair, this investigation related to the abuse of the Secret Services account. The Secret Services account is monies that must be utilized by crime intelligence for covert operations, specifically for organized crime. The Secret Services account is not being audited in a similar fashion as the open account has been audited. Although there are committees at Parliament that has oversight over the budget, but be that as it may, some time ago, and I cannot recall the exact period, the whistleblower in this whole matter was a person by the name of General Mark Hankel from Crime Intelligence, who wrote a report about how this fund was being abused by individuals within Crime Intelligence. And at the time, I think General Dramot was the head of the Hawks, the national head, and he appointed Colonel Kobus Roelofse from the Western Cape, who I would describe as the chief investigator in the looting of the Secret Services account. That investigation pointed fingers towards the then head of the Divisional Commission of Crime Intelligence, Lieutenant General Richard Mdluli. So that investigation had been going on for quite a while, and I also know at the particular juncture within that investigation that General Shadrack Sibia from Gauteng had also reopened an investigation into the murder of a person. I think it was in Vosloorus, I cannot recall exactly where, in which it was alleged that Richard Mdluli also had a hand in. That investigation, I'm not privy to that investigation, although a lot of reporting about that had been done in the media. But where my involvement comes in is, at a much later stage when this investigation had been initiated, the then acting National Commissioner at the time from the police, General Mkhwanazi, I don't know whether he had been informed by sources within Crime Intelligence, but he instituted a separate leg of investigations relating to the abuse of the Secret Services account in KwaZulu-Natal. I had a brigadier at some point who worked with me in KwaZulu-Natal, Brigadier Simon Madonsela. He's not related, I mean asked the question, but he's not related to Thuli Madonsela, the advocate. So his wife had taken ill and he also transferred to Pretoria, which I arranged for him. When he arrived in Pretoria, one of the first investigations they allocated to him, I think it was allocated to him by General Motiba, was to investigate the KZN leg of the looting of the Secret Services account by Crime Intelligence. I recall Madonsela coming to me expressing his frustration because Crime Intelligence failed or refused to make certain documents available to him to to assist in the investigation. So he would often come to me in Durban because we were quite close and we are still close. And I would say to him, Simon, the best way to get these documents is to 205 it. And just to explain 205 again, it's Section 205 subpoena in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, whereby we obtain documents from institutions or individuals that can assist us in our investigation. And he would continuously say to me, no, they promised they would give it to him, and then he would come back and say, no, they're frustrating him. And I recall at one juncture, they came to my house and they showed me the dockets. And I asked Brigadier Maronsela if I could make copies of the dockets. And he said to me, no, I cannot make copies of the dockets. And I asked him if he would mind if I take notes from the dockets. He said, no, that's fine.
Can I just interrupt you there for a second? Is it then our understanding, is it then your evidence, that you assisted Brigadier Madonsela
Yes.
in his investigation in relation to the KZN arm of the looting of the Secret Services account?
That's right, Chair.
So were you formally involved in the process?
No, I wasn't, Chair.
Okay, you said they came to you. One of them was Mr. Madonsela, and who else was with him when you asked if you could make copies of those documents?
Chair, there were three people. Well, two of them I knew very well. That was Brigadier Simon Madonsela, and then there was another person as well as Lieutenant Zungu, and they also had working with him Captain Heerlal. Heerlal was from Pretoria, and Zungu and Madonsela originated from KZN.
The documents that they came to show you, were they documents that they had obtained by following your advice?
No, Chair.
Oh, okay.
At that juncture, Chair, they were all affidavits.
Okay,
And some documents, police documents.
yes.
And Chair, I wrote down.
You make notes.
I made notes. I wrote down the name of each witness in that, of each statement that was filed in the docket.
Yes.
So I'd write it down, and if it was a police person, I would write his or her parcel number down so it would be easy to locate them afterwards. And if it was a private person, I would write these contact details down, and then I would just write a little précis of what the witness or person said in his statement.
Can I just, at this juncture, take you to page 131 of your affidavit, please? Not of your affidavit, of bundle ZA.
Is it 131 of Exhibit ZA?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, those are my contemporaneous handwritten notes, a copy thereof.
Yes.
Can you please proceed then to just explain, as you were explaining, the order of what you had documented and the nature of its contents?
So, Chair, that's basically what I did. I made a short précis of what each witness said, and I kept those notes. It was common cause in KZN, especially amongst the crime intelligence fraternity, that Brigadier Simon Madonsela and myself were just more than colleagues. We were actually personal friends.
Yes.
I know his children, he knows my children, he visits me, I visit him, etc.
Yes.
And he would frequent my office, and they knew that I was assisting him
Yes.
and advising him, not assisting, but advising him
Yeah.
in this particular matter.
Yes.
This thing carried on about having these documents provided to him from crime intelligence. So eventually, he took up my advice and he applied for Section 205 subpoenas, which were granted. And I recall him coming to my office and saying to me, he's going to court now. That particular morning, the magistrate had made a ruling that they must submit the dockets. And he was very excited that he was eventually going to get those dockets to formalize his investigations. And then the next moment he left for court. The next moment, about an hour later, he phones me. And I said to him, we called each other Mfowethu. I said, Mfowethu, where are you now? He says, no, I'm on my way back to Pretoria. I said, I thought you had court. He says, no, When they arrived at court, a senior officer from crime intelligence had come to court and told the magistrate that there was an agreement of some sorts, but it's not necessary any longer for the documents to be released. So Brigadier Maronsela got into his car and he drove back to Pretoria. So he phones me back from Pretoria and he says to me, he's very upset now because I said, what happened? He says, no, when he arrived in Pretoria, he went to General Motiba's office and he was told to hand over all the dockets, all 15 dockets, to General Motiba. He then said to me, Motiba said to him, well, this is an instruction from the National Commission at the time, Ria Pieja, General Ria Pieja. And I think he still said to me that Motiba told him he can clarify this with General Godfrey Labia, who's the current head of the Hawks. So Simon got into his car, according to him, and he went to General Labia, and General Labia confirmed that General Pieja had given the instruction that those dockets must be taken away from him. I recall sometime afterwards, I was in his...
So, I'm sorry, the instruction as you understood it from General Pieja was that the docket that Brigadier Madonsela had in regard to this investigation should be taken away from him.
That's what Madonsela told me.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Would that amount to saying he must not continue with the investigation if that docket was taken away, or there may have been different dockets, he could still continue with the investigation?
No, General, it was taken away from him. That was not the first time, because on a previous occasion, those dockets had been taken away from him, and I cannot recall the exact details, and it was sent to the Inspector General. And I remember there was a fallout in the media about the dockets being sent to the Inspector General, and in my view, the Inspector General cannot adjudicate upon dockets. So that's got to go to the prosecuting authority. But be that as it may, I think Simon told me it was either 6 weeks or 3 months that those dockets were with the Inspector General, and they were eventually returned to him with not a single entry made in those dockets. So he proceeded up until the time he applied for the 205s, and then he was called back, and for the second time the dockets were taken away from him. And according to him, what he was informed by General Motiba and General Labia, that those were on the instructions of General Ria Pieja.
But now they were taken away from him by whom, and where were they taken to? Do you know?
Chair, they were taken away, physically taken away from him, and they were handed over, according to Maronsela, and a person that for a while still remained on the investigation, they were handed to Captain Heerlal. And I do speak about Heerlal a bit later on, Chair, because there were some developments later on, which was also became very suspicious to me. But the point I'm making, Chair, is that this is a high-level investigation. It's allocated to a brigadier who's doing what he has to do. It gets taken away from him and then handed over to a less experienced investigating officer.
So he was much more experienced than the person that was given the dockets.
Chair, I would say if I can draw parallel, Maronsela would have been like a SC, and Heerlal was like a junior lawyer who just finished university.
Okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
Chair, I recall a while after that there was some investigation about those dockets. And Brigadier Maronsela was visiting me at my son's house in Pretoria, and he received a phone call, and I can understand a little bit of Zulu. So, but I could hear he was very annoyed. So he put the phone down, and I said to him, what was that about, Simon? He said to me, no. He was phoned by legal services. They now need a statement from him about what had occurred there. And he said to me, General, I'm hurtful. And he told this person he's not going to make a statement. I said, Simon, make a statement. He said, but who's going to back me up? I said, I can guarantee you General Labia will back you up. He says, but I haven't got Labia's number. I gave him General Labia's number. I said, speak to General Labia. So he phoned General Labia, the current head of the Hawks, And Labia confirmed with him on the phone that he will support him. He will make a statement that it was indeed General Piego who instructed that those dockets be taken away from him. Chair, then much later, when Mr. McBride came on board, he got to know about those dockets. So he approached me and asked me, would it be possible for me to get hold of those dockets? I said, well, look, I can try. So through my contacts, I made inquiries, and Zungu was also part of the investigation. I don't know whether they approached Heerlal, or, but be that as it may, he said, no, they'll see what they can do. And then a week or so later, Zungu came to me with what was supposed to be copies of the dockets. But when I saw him approaching me, I realized there was something wrong, because I knew the volume of the dockets before, and what he was bringing to me on face value was less than I'd seen previously. So I went through the statements and compared it with my list, and every single witness who implicated Richard Ndluli and a number of other officers, all those statements were removed from the docket. Well, they weren't part of the docket. So whether it was taken out by Heerlal or whether it was taken out by someone else, I don't know. But every single statement that incriminates Richard Ndluli and other senior officers is sanitized from the docket. I then made an affidavit describing, as I described to Chair now, the circumstances. And I listed each witness and what they more or less said. And I handed that with a copy of my contemporaneous notes to Mr. McBride. So I suspect that they're still busy with that investigation, Chair.
How long ago was that when you handed that over to Mr. McBride?
Chair, I'd say about 18 months ago. But
Okay.
in between, I have been engaging with Mr. McBride, but between him and myself, then we suspended, then he suspended, then I'm back, and then he suspended again. And then when he gets back, I'll inquire from him. Then he tells me, no, things have gone missing. I'll testify later on about an exhibit that I handed to him in a very, very serious matter. That after, when he returned from work, he phoned me and he said to me, he calls me chief and I call him boss. He said, hey, chief, that exhibit.
Well, it told us, I think last week, when he was called for the first time boss. Yes, but it didn't say it was you, it was somebody else.
No, we come from the same area in Durban. He's from Wentworth and I'm from Mimsentoti.
Oh, okay.
So we grew up on the wrong side of Durban. So he said to me, hey chief, have you still got a copy of this recording? And I said, no, I do. And I said, what happened to the one I gave you? He said, no, while he was suspended, when he got back, it had gone missing. So I don't know what happened to those 15 dockets, the investigations regarding that. I've spoken to him recently about that.
Oh, thank you.
Is it correct then that you do not conclusively know the reason for why the statements incriminating Richard Ndluli and other police officials were not included in the bundle of documents you received?
I don't, Chair. I can only speculate.
All you are saying is you found it strange that documents of witnesses statements of witnesses that you had seen which incriminated a particular individual were all not there in the file when you saw it. That's what you're saying.
That's true, Chair. And something I omitted to tell you, there were also correspondence which I saw in the dockets. And it was correspondence from General Godfrey Labia, who at that time was a Deputy National Commissioner, in which he gave certain instructions. Those were copies of those instructions, that there should be an investigation against Richard Ndluli. And there were a whole list, and I think I might have listed some of the names of people that had been promoted in terms of the Secret Services account. So what they do, Chair, if there's a covert investigation, they take a profile of a particular individual, if it's, for instance, in a drug-related matter, I'll identify a policeman, say, in the Western Cape that fits a profile of a drug dealer. I'll recruit that policeman, and he resigns from the police. They take him off the system. He then becomes an agent. So everyone thinks he's left the police, but in the meantime, he's an agent. So what they did with this in the Secret Services account, they would appoint people like that as agents. And some of them, I think some of them had never even seen the inside of a police station, but all of a sudden they're now agents. And some of them are promoted, as far as I know, up to the rank of colonel. And I know individuals that still hold the rank of colonel, who had been promoted in terms of the Secret Services account. So that's how they abused it.
Thank you.
If I can then take you to page 20 of your affidavit, and in particular paragraph 64.
Sorry?
So it's page 20 of your affidavit, paragraph 64. Can you please inform or rather your evidence in your affidavit focuses on one particular example in relation to the looting of the Secret Services account. Can you please inform this commission of this particular example you refer to and why this particular example was so important to highlight?
Chair, one of the transactions that at some juncture had been investigated was a fence that was built around the residence of the then Minister of Police, Minister Natim Tetwa, to the amount of 195,000 rand, 581 rand and 45 cents.
Where was this fence built?
It was built around his private residence, I think roundabout in Pangeni, Chair. Now, Chair, at the time when the looting of the Secret Services account surfaced, it was reported that the fence had been paid for through the Secret Services account, their funds. And it was common course at the time, because it had been reported in the media, that the matter had been investigated by the Auditor General at the time, who exonerated the then Minister of Police.
Who had investigated?
The Auditor General.
Yes, okay.
But Chair, in my view, and I'm including documentation in my statement.
Yes.
The understanding was that the minister at the time was unaware. Now, subsequent to that, there was an engagement with.
I'm sorry. As you understand it, the idea was that the minister was unaware of what?
Of where that the money had come from the Secret Services account.
Okay.
So, Chair, if I can digress a little bit, recently there was a radio interview between myself and Karima Brown from 702, where I mentioned this, and no sooner had I arrived home, the then Minister Natim Tetwa had made contact with Karima Brown from 702 and said to her that I'm clasping at straws, and he basically said that I'm not talking the truth. So she invited me back to the studio the following evening, because she said she would invite the minister. So she asked me if I would come. So I said, well, tell the minister I'll meet him in the studio tonight. I went back to the studio, he didn't pitch. So they did a radio interview with him. Now, during that radio interview, he once again said that I'm clasping at straws. And he explained that as minister, he was entitled to security upgrades at his house in terms of the ministerial handbook. And that the ministerial handbook says that he can get security upgrades to 100,000 rand, and he was unaware that they overspent. The point I'm making, Chair, is I went and I had a look at this at the ministerial handbook. According to the ministerial handbook, he is entitled, the minister is entitled. But it must be at his request, number one. Secondly, there must be a risk assessment. And then thirdly, the Department of Works will then deal with the matter. And the ministerial handbook is clear. It says security upgrades up to the amount of 100,000 rand. Any amount in excess of that will be for the account of the office bearer.
Can I interrupt you there then and take you to excerpts of that ministerial handbook you refer to, which is starts at page 113. Is it correct that these are extracts of the ministerial handbook that you were referring to?
They are, Chair.
Can I ask you to please turn to page 115 and read only the first sentence into the record?
This handbook is a guideline for benefits and privileges to which ministers and their families are entitled in the execution of their duties.
In correction to your reading, it is not ministers but members.
Sorry, Chair.
Is that correct? Can I then ask you to turn to page 117, please? Is it correct that member at the top is defined to include a minister?
It does, Chair.
Is it also correct that national members means minister, a minister amongst others?
That's my understanding, Chair.
And in the definition of private residence, which is the sixth definition, it's defined to mean a privately owned house. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Can I then take you to page 118? This document is titled Annexure E and named Policy on Security Measures at the Private Residences of Public Office Bearers. Can you please read the first line, beginning with the word cabinet, and then paragraphs 1 and 2 into the record, please?
Cabinet approved on 11th of June 2003 the following provisions of the above policy. The Minister of Public Works may approve a state contribution of a non-recoverable maximum amount of 100,000 rand or the total cost of security measures not exceeding 100,000 rand. Should the cost of the security measures be more than 100,000 rand, the difference shall be borne by the public office bearer.
And then at page 120, can I ask you to read paragraph 11 into the record, please?
Security measures may be implemented at public office bearers' private residences occupied on a regular basis in the areas other than Cape Town or Pretoria.
Do you know where the private residence of Minister Nathi Mthethwa is situated, which benefited from the building of a fence?
It's in the area of Mpangeni, Chair.
Thank you. And it is correct that your testimony was that the cost of the fence exceeded 100,000 rand.
That was my evidence, Chair. Where was the funds for the payment of the building of a fence ought to have been secured from? Chair, it's my understanding that it should have at least have come from an open account and not from the Secret Services account. That's the first call. Secondly, it should have come, in my view, from the parliamentary budget, or then secondly, the police's budget, via the Department of Works. And then the excess, I think it's 193,000 rand, should have been borne by the office bearer, which was the minister at the time.
So you say the source of the funding was a wrong source. The amount expended was a wrong amount insofar as wrong amount that was paid by the state because it exceeded 100,000 rand. And the procedure followed, you say, was a wrong procedure because this issue is supposed to be handled by the Department of Public Works and not through the secret account.
Those are the points I'm making, but there's one extra point I would like to make, Chair.
Yes.
During the conversation with Karima Brown on 702, the Minister attempted to justify the building of the fence around his house, which I don't have a problem with. But he at least now know that the money came from the wrong funds. I don't know whether any attempts were made to reallocate those funds and get the funds from the proper budget, and whether any attempts were made to repay the 90-odd thousand rand, which was in excess of the 100,000 rand that he was entitled to.
Did you say he did not know that it came from the secret fund account?
That is my understanding of what came out of the Auditor General's report at the time, Chair.
Yes, okay.
And then just for the record, if I can take you to page 20, paragraph 65 of your affidavit. You refer there to an interview on Radio 702 on the 17th of October 2018. Is that in fact the date of the interview to which your evidence concerning the interview relates?
That's the date, Chair.
Thank you. If I may just at this particular stage place something on record, Chair. Paragraph 68 of the witness's affidavit refers to an annexure JWB 10, which is enclosed as part of the bundle. It is a document marked secret, but has a stamp on it which declassifies the document. However, we are in the process of just clarifying the actual status of this document, and so that evidence is not going to be referred to at this stage until such proper confirmation is sought.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
If I can now take you then to page 23 of your affidavit. Which starts the next investigation that your evidence concerns. And that investigation...
I'm sorry, just in case I missed something. Going back to the investigation that Brigadier Madonsela was doing, the docket was taken from him and given to somebody else, much junior to him. And then at some stage, you understand that the docket was sent to the IGI, is it the IGI? The Inspector General. And then when it came back, there were no notes to indicate that any work had been done on it. And is that how far you know about what happened with that investigation?
Chair, can I just get the sequence right? Madonsela was investigating, and then when he started probing, the dockets were taken away from him and sent to the Inspector General.
Yes.
I think it was Faith Radebe at the time.
Yes.
There was quite a lot of complaints in the media about it, and then it was either 6 weeks or 3 months later, the dockets were returned to Madonsela, Simon Madonsela, with no entries whatsoever be made. So they were basically lied there for that period of time without any progress whatsoever. He then continued with the investigation, sought my advice, which I gave him, came to my house, that's when I made the notes, eventually applied for the 205s. They were authorized, but when he went to court to now get the documents, he was recalled to Pretoria by General Motiba. Dockets were taken away from him and then handed to a junior member.
Oh, okay, so I got some of these steps in the wrong sequence.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I thought that when the files were, docket was taken away from him, that was after when they were taken to, the docket was taken to the Inspector General, that was before the 205s. He applied for the 205s.
That's correct, Chair.
So he applied for the 205s after the docket had come back from the IGI, and then at a certain stage, the docket was taken away from him and given to somebody much junior to him to investigate.
That's correct, Chair.
And that's where the whole thing ended, as far as you know.
Until that's where it stopped, Chair, until I handed my affidavit with my notes over to Mr. McBride.
Yes. But Mr. McBride would have been investigating the conduct of police officers in relation to that investigation and not doing the actual investigation.
Chair, not really. What happened is, when McBride came on board, when he phoned me and asked me what was going on, and I gave him described to him what was going on, and he asked me for a report, which I did the same evening, and he immediately sent investigators down, and he set the wheels in motion to have all these investigations, which had become dormant, to rekindle them. And while we were having these discussions, he still joked and he said to me, "Watch, I'll be the next one to be suspended." And I said, "No, they'll never suspend you because you've got the right credentials." And lo and behold, he was eventually suspended.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So for all intents and purposes, as far as you know, that investigation does not appear to have been taken further after the docket was taken from Brigadier Madonsela and given to somebody else.
Chair, according to me, those dockets have gone nowhere. Even while it's been at IPID, I'm alive to what's happened at IPID with Mr. McBride, his suspensions and trying to keep him out of his job. So there were other investigations also that we communicated with to each other that I know would. And he expressed his frustrations at some points, and I'll perhaps talk about that later, that when he gets back from suspension, things had gone missing, people from his office had been suspended or fired. So what happened to those dockets, I really cannot tell you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, before we move on to the next investigation, and guided by your direction, of course, I'm not sure if this particular chapter would finalize by the time that you've directed.
Let's start it,
and
even if we don't
happy
finalize it.
I'm happy to continue.
Let's use the time.
Okay, no problem. So at page 23 of your affidavit, paragraph 75, are you there, General Booysen? You talk about another investigation, although your involvement in this particular investigation was quite different. This investigation you have called the Cato Manor investigation. In very simple terms, please explain what this investigation entailed, and in particular, what your involvement in this investigation was and is.
Chair, after I'd arrested Colonel Madu, or had him arrested, caused him to be arrested for the attempt to bribe me, Chair would recall that he had showed me some photographs. It was in early December 2011. Major General Dina Moodley, the head of crime intelligence at KwaZulu-Natal, came to my office, and he said to me that there were two reporters from the Sunday Times, Stefan Hofstadter and Mzilkazi wa Afrika. The way he described it to me, it sounded like he had actually been part of this meeting. That's now General Moodley. And that they were going to run a story that Sunday that I'm basically the head of a death squad. That this one unit that ultimately reported to me, Cato Manor, had committed extrajudicial killings, and that I was the leader of the so-called death squad. And they were going to phone me, I think he said the Saturday evening, for my comments, to basically catch me off guard, and then proceed with publishing the story the Sunday. I immediately asked my attorney, Mr. Carl van der Merwe, to contact the then editor of the Sunday Times, Mr. Ray Hartley, to ask him that we want, in terms of the audi alteram partem rule, we would like a proper opportunity to explain what
to respond to the allegations.
That's right, Chair. Which they agreed to, and then I think it was on the following Wednesday, Mr. Stefan Hofstadter arrived at my office, and Afrika wasn't there, and he dialed in, and so Afrika was on the line. And they started with all the allegations, and we had a long discussion, and I made it clear to Mr. Hofstadter that the photographs that they had, which I had seen, some of them weren't even scenes where Cato Manor had been involved in. One particular one, which was eventually published, and I think it was one of the most gruesome ones, was spread over almost half a page of a number of people that had been shot dead on a light delivery vehicle. And I indicated to him that, look, the photographs that you guys have, not all those people were shot by Cato Manor. They then came with a story that, and this eventually would become the nub of one of the complaints against me, Chair. They said to me that the information is that in a shootout in Howick on the freeway, I can't recall if it's N1 or N2, that I was in a police helicopter, and that I basically blocked the vehicle, and my guys came and shot the people in the car, almost like in the movies. So I said to him, look, you've got a version, I have a different version. My version is, I was sitting in my office at the time, I only heard about it afterwards, and I then went to the police's air wing, and where I took the police chopper, and I only arrived there quite some time later. I said, what you need to do is to establish the objective facts, is go to the police's air wing, and find out what time they picked me up, because it's all logged in the helicopter's logbook. They also then indicated to me that they'd interviewed Mr. Madhu, who by now is an accused, who accused me of all sorts of things, and that he was, according to Madhu, he was actually investigating me for atrocities, which I thought was a joke because he's from supply chain management. I don't even think he can investigate shoplifting. And I said to him, and Madhu accused me of not handing in the exhibits to the police's exhibit register. I said to him, I looked out of my window, I said, there's the police station, Durban Central, go and ascertain the facts. Chair, it was clear to me that the nature of the conversation there was they'd already written their story and they're not going to change it, which they did. The following week, on the 11th of December 2011, the article appeared, big heading, shoot to kill, and I still phoned General Dramat, my immediate head. I said to him, look, this thing is in the paper. He advised me a day or two later that he would be appointing General Jan Mabula from Northwest, and also two other generals, General Badi, I cannot recall her first name, from the Eastern Cape, and General Lindsay Ntsika. I think she was from one of the other provinces, just to come and investigate the articles in the newspaper. The Chair, a couple of days later, only Jan Mabula arrived at my office, General Jan Mabula, with a Colonel Manu. Colonel Manu, I later he since passed away, established that he was actually accused of torture in a different matter in the High Court here in Gauteng. So I said to Mabula, Jan, I said, Jan, because I was expecting him to investigate. So I said, look, I'll make my office at your disposal if you want to use my secretary or typewriter, or have anything typed to make photocopies. And I also instructed whomever at my office to cooperate with Mabula. He departed, and then, that was just before Christmas. He said, no, they'll be back after Christmas. So after Christmas, they come back again. But they're very evasive, Chair. I mean, we're colleagues, we're generals together, and I've done him favors in the past. But all of a sudden, I could just sense that there was something, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Then later on, I get a call from the same warrant officer, Mostert, who had engaged Pandey. And he said to me, General, one of my informers phoned me, and the informant now been approached by, excuse me, Chair, by some of Mabula's team, and they're putting pressure on them to make certain statements. That was also reported by Mostert to Colonel Hussein. And Hussein still wrote a letter expressing his concern that the informant had now been exposed. But then something else happened, Chair. This same Zungu was involved in the looting of the Secret Service's account investigation. He was now with crime intelligence, so I received a call through a colleague of mine saying that Zungu wants to see you. At that time, I was very suspicious of what was happening, so I didn't know what to make of, because I hadn't seen him for quite some time. So I said to this colleague of mine, tell Zungu to meet me outside Kentucky in a Mamsentoti. So I drove out to Mamsentoti, and because I didn't know what the purpose of the visit was, I decided to record the conversation. But Zungu he was faster than I was, so he was waiting under a tree while I was sitting in the car busy preparing to get the recorder right. The next moment he knocked on my window. So I said, hey, Zungu, jump in the car. So he said to me, General, I've got a serious concern. I said, what's wrong, Zungu? Now, since that day, Zungu's name is Kentucky. I call him Kentucky. So I said to Zungu, what's the problem? He says to me, no, General Mabula's detectives, who's now investigating this so-called extrajudicial killings, had called him to the hotel where they were staying in Durban. In one of the cases where it's alleged that KwaZulu-Natal had committed an extrajudicial killing was the shooting of a person by the name of Bongani Mkhize. Zungu was the investigating officer in a different matter when Nkosi Zondo was murdered and in which suspect had been sought. And Mkhize was one of the suspects being sought for the killing of Nkosi Zondo. So, and he had made an affidavit in one of the dockets that Mkhize was being sought. So they tried to get him to change his statement. Mabula's team tried to get him to change his statement, and he refused. And he says he eventually just said, look, he's uncomfortable what's going on here. No, he's going to excuse himself. And he said that almost like it was like a veiled threat, we'll be back. And that's when he left and decided to come and inform me. Chair, I then started to wonder what's going on here. They're supposed to be objective in the investigations. Now they're trying to get people to change statements. They're going to informers. I think that recording might still be available, where one of the informers had a second meeting with him, which we recorded. So they were putting pressure on people to implicate detectives of KwaZulu-Natal in wrongdoing. Then I received a strange phone call from a journalist. It was, I cannot recall her name. She was from a television station, and I recall at one stage she also spoke on CNN. but not about our case. But she always used to come and talk to us in Durban, and then she said to me, General, I believe they're going to charge you for racketeering. So I said to him, you must be joking, man. They don't know what racketeering is. Because I've been trained in racketeering by Michael Johnson from the US. I've been trained by prosecutors here in South Africa. They surely do not know what racketeering is. So, Chair, so this whole thing carried on and on and on. And then, on one particular day, I was informed that Mabula and his team were down here to arrest some of the Cato Manor guys. So I phoned Colonel Olivier, who was the immediate commander, and I said to him, Willie, get the guys together, they're going to arrest them, let them hand themselves over. So they all went to the office, and Carl van der Merwe, the attorney, then phoned Mabula, said, we understand you want to arrest the guys. And Mabula and them denied it initially. Some reporters would phone them because the reporters now had got wind of the story, and they could see the activity at the one hotel that they were staying at. But they all denied that they were about to arrest the Cato Manor guys. But they remained at the office throughout the night. And then early that morning, some of the detectives of Cato Manor's wife started calling in to say, look, the armed police outside the house here, and so they all decided to go home. And as they went home, in most of the instances, the media was already waiting there. They were arrested in full view of the media. They were then taken to a central point at the airport, at the police's air wing, where they were paraded in front of the cameras. Subsequent to that, they had to reappear in court in August. I think that they appeared in June or July. They had to reappear in August.
Of which year, if I may interject?
That was 2012.
Thank you.
The Chair, I get this call from, he was then Colonel Parasa Ngube. And he says to me, General, can I see you? But by then I'd gotten uncomfortable, and I'd written to Mabula and his team. We'd written to the prosecuting authority, if they want to arrest me, by all means, I'll present myself wherever you want me. And we did that on more than one occasion. And on this particular day, I was driving in my car, and I got a phone call from Colonel Parasa Ngube. He said to me, General, I would like to see you. So I said to him, well, do you want to arrest me? He says, oh, maybe. I said, well, it's not a joke. If you want to arrest me, tell me. He says, no, he's got a warrant for my arrest. I said, fine. Where would you like me to meet you? So I suggested we'll meet at my office. Drove back to my office, and I sat there in my boardroom. Then I went to all my staff because I didn't want them to come barging in there. And so I called all my staff, and I said to them, look, this is what's going to happen. So don't be upset, and go back to your offices and carry on with your work. But 20 minutes later, I phoned him. I said, I'm still waiting for you. He says, no, they're coming now. So in the meantime, I got a phone call from a member of the Special Task Force. Now, the Special Task Force are people that deal with terrorists and hostage situations. And I happened to work with these guys over years. They all knew me. So he said to me, General, we're on our way to come and arrest you. I said, no, I'm waiting for you guys. He says, but we've got instructions to handcuff you. I said, well, then you have to comply with your instructions. And then a few minutes later, they arrived at my office in the boardroom. By then, I had summoned my attorney.
So specific instructions had been given that you be handcuffed?
Yes, Chair. Yes. So they arrived there with a Special Task Force and the camouflage. And I sat in my office, and Brigadier Ngube sat across me, and he showed me the warrant of arrest. I said, well, I'm entitled to a copy. He gave me a copy. I then asked him for a copy of the founding affidavit, and he didn't even know what a founding affidavit was. I had to explain to him what a founding affidavit was. Chair, it was actually a farce the way I was arrested, because it looked like I was arresting him, because I was taking all the notes and he was just sitting there. It was clear that he was under instructions. And after the formalities had been concluded, he said, okay, no, we have to go, but they have to handcuff me. So I said to him, Colonel, you've got the Special Task Force here. These youngsters are fit and strong. I'm much older than them. I mean, surely I don't pose a danger. No, they've got to follow rules. I said, no, well, then do what you have to do. They then took cable ties and tied my hands in front of me. And then they escorted me out in the lift. The cleaner was still there, and the cleaner often comes to my office. I'll give him some of my sandwiches, and he looked at me, what's going on now? We got into the car, and we drove to my house, and I looked around, and there was an entourage of media people following us. So they obviously alerted the media as well. We arrived at my house. My domestic, she's used to that I bring people home, and she always offered them water, and she still offered them water, but when she realized, no, there's something else going on, she got nasty with them. I said, no, Dorothy, tambisa bichane, and stay calm. So we went to they ransacked my house. I don't know what they were looking for. And then at some point, Ngube says to me, where is your official firearm? I said, you see, Ngube, you're only interested in embarrassing me by handcuffing me in front of the people and dragging me out of the office. But the most important thing you should have done is to look where my firearm is. So I lifted my pants and I said, there's my firearm. And he said, oh, you could have shot us. I said, exactly. And then I handed my firearm to them. But I first said to them, I want them to take a photograph, which they did, because they had the police photographer there. And I said, I want to see the photograph. And I had a look at it. And I couldn't see my bathroom in the background because I wanted to use that photograph. I had to ask them to take another one, which they did. And then, Chair, we went to the air wing. Chair, I'm one of the police officers that have probably flown, that's not part of the air wing, that's probably flown the most in the police helicopter over the years. The police air wing is a secure place. It's got probably a 4-meter high fence. When you enter there, you've got a buzz, and they look at you, and they identify you. They open this huge gate, and then you proceed. On this particular day, and after they'd arrested me, that gate was standing open. We drove in, and it looked like the Oscars. It was just paparazzi and cameras. So we drove around the back. And they took me in the back, and a few of the other guys that they'd also now arrested. So we went in and they started with the fight, but it was clear to that Ngube, and I still said to him, you're playing with time here because I want to go and apply for bail. And then he would go halfway through the forms, and then he made a mistake, then he would start all over again, clearly playing for time. Then the task force member came into my office. He said to me, they've just been admonished by General Mabula. I said, why? He says, no, because we didn't take in the front where the media was. So I got up and I said, Paraza, excuse me 1 second. I went to Mabula. I said to him, Jan, I don't mind if you arrest me or investigate me, but don't make a circus out of this thing. Then he said, no, it's not him. It's Len Angus from IPIT. I went to Len Angus. I said to Len Angus, listen, you want to make a circus? Well, let's put a tent around this place then. So he said, no, he's got no problem if we leave that we should go around the back again. And then when they finally processed us, by now it's too late to go to court. So I knew now tonight I'm sleeping inside the cells. Myself and a couple of my colleagues. So Angus comes back to me and he says to me, no, Mabula's adamant, we must go through the front. I said, no, well, let me go through the front where the media is. And I was walking in the front with the rest of my guys behind me. And then Angus came to me and he said to me, General, if it's going to make you feel more comfortable, I can take your coat and put it over your head. I said to him, Len, I've never had any reason to hide my face. I'm not going to hide my face. I'm going to walk out and I'll face the cameras. I turned around, I said to my guys, those of you who want to cover your faces, you're welcome to do so. I'm not going to do that. And we all walked out and with flashes going, and it was actually embarrassing. Not the media. The media knew me. But going through that passage with junior police officers, constables, sergeants, all standing there with their cell phones. Here comes the general in handcuffs. That to me was probably the most embarrassing. They then put us in the vehicle and we were taken to Durban North Police Station where we were detained for the night, and the following morning we appeared in court and we were granted, they did not oppose bail, and we were granted 5,000 rand bail each. And then later on we were charged for racketeering. those were the charges against us. And the main allegation was that a number of shooting incidents over a period of 3.5 years, they alleged that those shootings were extrajudicial killings. At least 5 of those people that they were accused of having killed unlawfully, at least in 5 of those matters, inquest proceedings had been finalized. And magistrates had made findings ruling in the favor of the Cato Manor members. In other cases I'm aware of, had already been to the DPP for decision, and they were nolly prosecuted, declined to prosecute. Some were still under investigation. So, Chair, as Chair is aware, once you are prosecuted, you are entitled to copies of the docket. So they provided us with copies of the dockets, and at that point, Chair, I thought, when all this is going on, you start to doubt yourself, and then you start to wonder, where did I do something wrong? And you toss and turn in bed, and I thought, okay, the only thing it can be, they must have fabricated a case against me. They must have taken false statements. So I took the dockets home, and now I'm reading through the dockets. There were 23 dockets, Chair. But I don't figure anywhere. I'm not finding the statements that I thought were fabricated statements. There were 3 statements where my name appeared. The one is from a captain, I think it's Pillay, who says he went to the Howick shooting scene. When he arrived, he saw the police helicopter standing on the freeway, and he also saw General Booysen there. That's the sum total of his evidence. The other one was the crew of the helicopter, who says they picked up General Booysen at the air wing. We flew there, we landed. Booysen had a look at the scene, we flew back. That was the full extent of his statement. There was a third statement. That person's name was Cochrane. There was a third statement by Shamila Williams from IPID, in which he attended to a shooting in Durban North at some stage. I happened to arrive at that scene 5 hours afterwards. And she merely mentions in the statement that after she had attended the scene, I also saw, and I think at that stage, I can't remember if I was a brigadier or general, but she says I saw Brigadier Booysen, but that is much later. That was the sum total of my names in the dockets.
In the dockets, yeah.
So, Chair, I immediately approached my attorney and I said to him, look, I'm not happy with this. I mean, how can you charge a person for racketeering? I've been trained, Chair, in racketeering.
You know what
I know,
it
Chair,
is.
as a provincial head of the Hawks, we have seen a couple of cases through of racketeering. I know what it takes to convince the NDPP to sign that Section 2.1 certificate. So I took the matter on review, Chair, the decision to prosecute me on the basis of legality and irrationality. I filed my founding affidavit, and then in the answering affidavit of the then acting NDPP advocate Nonkobo Jiba, she files 3 extra statements that did not form part of the docket. The one is of a deceased person who does not implicate me in the offence that I was being charged for. He merely mentions somewhere that he had heard 2. Now this person is now dead, Chair. This person had heard 2 other people saying that they shoot the people in the taxi violence issues, and then they collect money, and then they pay Cato Manor and Big Boss Booysen. Now, Chair, as far as I'm concerned, that's hearsay twice removed, but I won't go into that. But the 2 people that they mention are, well, up until recently, were both still alive. They were never approached to confirm those discussions. To the contrary, when those statements were discovered to us, through crime intelligence, I gave it to Colonel Carl van der Vyver. I said, do you know these people? They eventually traced them and showed them the statements. They then went to their attorney, which was Malloy and Partners, and ironically, who then spoke to Advocate Stix Madladla, who then took statements from those people that apparently had said that they collected money for Cato Manor, in which they disavowed every single aspect of the statement. In fact, the deceased person that apparently had made that statement was out on bail himself for murder. So that statement is one of the statements which Juba attaches. There's another one, an unsigned statement from a Greek citizen who happened to be a friend of mine. He's no longer a friend of mine, Chair. In which he makes wild allegations, but nothing pertaining to racketeering. It's more mischievousness than the commission of offences. But that particular document's not signed. And then there are two statements of a colonel, a very controversial colonel in KZN, Colonel Rajen Iyer. But if you read those statements, it looks like it's incoherent to say the least. But nowhere does it talk about any offence. It's pure office politics. But Jiba then says she considered evidence under oath, the evidence in the dockets and evidence under oath. And then the one statement taken from Iyer was dated 2 weeks after she had authorized the prosecution. The one of Danikas is not under oath. It's not signed. It's, for all intents and purposes, no one knows where it comes from at that time. So I filed a replying affidavit in which I accused her of being mendacious and explained to her, how could you have considered evidence which objectively seen could not have existed at the time that you took the decision? She did not take up my invitation. Long story short, Chair, Judge Gorvin ruled in my favor. He said none of the evidence in the dockets linked me to the commission of any offence. None of the statements that Jiba belatedly added links me they don't link anyone to the commission of an offence. Subsequent to that, Chair, normally the police are supposed to...
So the review application succeeds?
It succeeded, Chair.
Yes, and the decision to charge you is set aside, was set aside?
That is, no,
as a result of the review?
Chair, so in order to prosecute a person for racketeering, there must be 2 predicate offences.
Yes.
So what they did is the one incident that I'd gone to Harwick for.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder how senior advocates understand the law. For racketeering, you must have committed 2 predicate offences. Now, what they did in that particular instance, they alleged that at the Harwick matter where I flew to, the allegation is that I flew there and I planted an AK-47 on the scene. Now, Chair, in the book that I wrote, that's what I put that on the cover, because it was taken by a newspaper photographer. I still can't find the AK-47 that I was supposed to have planted there.
So what I was interested in is what was the actual order, the effect of the order in the review application?
Chair, what was set aside, the judge set aside the predicate offences. That was murder, because they alleged that there's a common purpose for the Howick matter, possession of unlicensed firearm, the AK-47, possession of unlicensed ammunition for the AK-47, and defeating the ends of justice for planting the firearm. Chair, there's not even remotely a suggestion or nothing whatsoever in the dockets that remotely suggests something like it. It's something that they made up.
Chair, to just assist with the review.
Yes.
Noting the time though. At paragraph 154, a copy of the actual judgment appears.
Yeah, what's the order? Is the order a short order? Is it a long order?
Chair, if I may, with your leave, just read quickly.
Yeah.
At page 180, which is paragraph 36. At the end of that paragraph, the judge finds that, and I read, I can conceive of no test for rationality, however relaxed, which could be satisfied by her explanation. The impugned decisions were arbitrary, offend the principle of legality, and therefore the rule of law, and were unconstitutional. In paragraph 38, the first sentence reads, I hasten to emphasize that this outcome is based purely on the facts of the present case. And paragraph 39.
It's the order that I'm really interested in.
The order is that, save for the interdict which Mr. Booysen sought, the remaining prayers were granted.
Oh, and the prayers.
In that,
Yeah, okay.
in that, if I could, it states that at page 183, there is no basis for the interdict sought by Mr. Booysen in paragraph 3, either in the form sought or in any other form.
Okay.
And then
No,
in the
that-
result,
that-
the
that's
order is
fine.
granted that in terms of paragraphs A, B, C, D, and F, referred to in paragraph 3 of the judgment, effectively all
Yeah.
the decisions were set aside,
Okay.
save for the interdict.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'll have a look. So the review application was successful. After that, the criminal proceedings against you arising from that were gone.
They withdrawn in court,
You
Chair.
were drawn in court. That might be the convenient time for us to adjourn for today. And then when we resume, then we can continue. But at least we have reached a point where you brought a review application and it was successful and the criminal charges were withdrawn. And then we can take it
Thank you,
further
Chair.
next time, yeah. Is that fine with you?
As it pleases, Chief.
Okay, all right. We are going to adjourn. We are not going to sit next week. We will continue on the 2nd of May. So you can then continue with your evidence. Is there anything Mr. Pretorius wants to say?
No, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I presume we start at the normal time, 10 o'clock, Chair.
Yes, we'll start at 10 o'clock on the 2nd of May. We'll then adjourn. We adjourn.
Are you here next week?
No.
Let's come back on the Monday before the 2nd,
Yeah.
on the 29th.
Yes.
Okay? But I want to meet with this afternoon.